Okay, let's work through how to do this spreadsheet together. Okay, so download the spreadsheet, open it up on your computer, have it looking something like this, and then when you've done that, you can start this video up again. Okay, so we need to work out, first of all, the number of possible routes depending upon the number of cities. And if you remember from the last video, that was a special mathematical thing called factorial. And factorial is simply timesing a number so by all of the smaller numbers. So factorial of 5 is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Okay, so that's a bit sort of tedious to do on your calculator lots and lots of times. So we're going to get Excel to do it for us. And once it's done it once, we can fill down. It'll do it for us as many times as we like. So again, if you remember back, we've used Excel before. When you're starting a formula, always start with the equal sign. Okay, the top right-hand part of your keyboard there. So start with an equal sign. And then I want to use factorial. Well, in mathematics, we use an exclamation mark for factorial, but Excel's not quite that smart. So I need to type in fact, F-A-C-T, and open up a bracket. So now it'll calculate the factorial of a number for me. Now, remember, it was the number of cities minus 1. So I'm going to click, instead of typing in the number of cities, I'm going to tell it the pattern that I want it to follow. So I'm just going to click on A1 minus 1. So it's the number of cities minus the first city, because the first city you're always told where you're starting. We were told that we're going to start at North Sydney, so the first choice is taken away from us. So now we've got the number of cities in total minus the starting city. That's what we want the factorial for. So A2 minus 1 and then finish the bracket off. And so that's going to tell me, well, with one city, there's one possible route. Of course there is. You just stay at North Sydney. Now we want to fill that down. And you can see that as you move your cursor to that bottom right-hand corner of the cell, the cursor changes to that cross. Then drag down for as much as you want to drag it down. I'm going to get you to drag it all the way down. And that will tell us the number of possible routes. Now, with 2 cities, there's still only one possible route because you start at North Sydney and then there's only one other place to go. So there's only one possible route. But if there's 3 cities, you start at North Sydney, well, there's 2 possible routes and then you're done. And so it increases. So to fill it all the way down, Shift, Control, and down arrow will take you right to the very bottom of the sheet. That's probably a bit too far. So we're just going to grab our cursor here. Sometimes that Shift, Control, down arrow is helpful if you put a placeholder at the bottom. We're going to drag all the way down there to 100 cities. And now you can see that our number of choices increases. Well, we can't understand what that number is. Let's just take a moment again to think about that number. That's 1.3 times 10 to the power of 12. So that's 10 multiplied by itself, 10 times 10 times 10, 12 times. That's a very, very big number. And that way of notation is how your calculator and how things like Excel show you numbers that would just be way, way, way too big to think about. And they are very, very, very big numbers. And so now we need to kind of work out the formula for how long will it take our classical computer to compute the amount of time that it takes to do it. Over here, I've already done the quantum computer because that calculation is quite difficult to do. And here's the quantum computer, the amount of time in the number of seconds and the amount of time in the number of years. So I want to do that for a classical computer. Well, if we scroll across to the right, I've done some calculations and I did some research actually and found with a MacBook Pro, like a really good computer, it's going to take you 7.4 times 10 to the minus 19. So a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of time for each possible route that you need to calculate. Okay, so we want to use M5 in our formula over here. So the amount of time is going to be equal to M5, the amount of time for one route to calculate one route, times, now in Excel, that's the asterisk that's above the number 8. So you go Shift 8, asterisk, and now I want to just click on the number of possible routes. So now my formula is how much time it's going to take for each route multiplied by the number of possible routes. Now, there's a bit of a trick here in the filling down. The problem is that if I fill down the way that I normally do, it takes M6, then M7, then M8. Well, I don't. I want it to use M5 every single time. And the way that I do that is that I put a $ in front of my number 5. So I'm going to put a $ there. And now I'm going to fill that down. And I want you to fill that all the way. And we'll come back to this in another video in a minute.